Hello and welcome to this new episode of Daughters of Narcissistic Mothers podcast. I'm Matilde and I'm your host. I'm an inner transformation mentor, supporting women in healing mother wounds through women's circles and through the one-on-one 10 weeks program. To know more about these offerings, check out my website, womenreclaimingtheirfullness.me. And if you want to know more about the upcoming offering of a full-on membership community, sign up to the newsletter so you can get more information on that. The link is in the description of this episode. And before we get into the topic of today, I want to pause for a moment and thank you all for being here, for listening to this podcast, for doing the work, and for sharing this podcast, and also for all the beautiful comments you leave, for your reviews. All of this. The podcast has been live now for a year and a half exactly, as I launched in June last year. So it's a year and a half, and we've reached 100,000 listens overall, and I am so I'm so happy. I didn't know when I started where this was gonna go. I had a vision. I still have a vision, and the vision is expanding. And I have a vision of serving, and I have a vision of a community where everyone can be supported, feel safe, reclaim their life, and heal the wounds and all of that. So you're making all of this possible. And your listens are so appreciated, and it's amazing that we're doing this together. So thank you so much. I just wanted to take a moment to say that. Now, with that said, today I want to share with you what happened during the last visit of my grandmother just short of 2 weeks ago, as I feel this may be helpful for you to hear. It was an interesting experience. I hadn't seen her for nearly a year and a half. So nearly for as long as I've been doing this podcast. And so it was revealing. It was very revealing to be in her presence. And I'm going to speak to why I'm talking about my grandmother and not my mother in a minute. But what went down is a great example of what can happen when you set boundaries with a narcissist. And it was intense. It was very intense, to say the least. And that's why I want to share this with you. Have you noticed an increase of toxic behavior in your narcissistic mother since you started setting strong boundaries? Does she keep changing tactic to get to you? Have you noticed that? That's what happened during this last visit. And I was expecting that, because I know that is what actually happens when you set boundaries. I spoke about this in the boundaries setting episodes, and I'm going to put the links of those episodes in the description of this one, because they're very related. But yet she still managed to get to me eventually, and that's why I wanted to share this with you. So for context, why am I talking about my grandmother and not my mother? I have been raised mainly by my grandmother when I was a child, making her a very strong mother figure in my childhood. So yes, my mother has been very relevant, but mainly because she wasn't there. She was neglecting me and my sister, and she caused a lot of abandonment issues because of that. And then later on, when we grew up a little bit more, so when I got to be about 12, 13, that's where she actually really started going on full-on grandiose narcissist, because she started being more present in my life. But up until that point, mainly it was my grandmother. So I've been blessed with my mother being a grandiose narcissist, and my grandmother, which was my main mother figure when I was younger, being a vulnerable narcissist. So guilt tripping and money control have been her two main manipulation tactics, alongside a strong triangulation system that has kept her at the head of the family. And we knew she was coming, my husband and I. We knew she was coming to visit us. We prepared. We went through the 5 points of step 1 in boundary setting, which is prepare. And your expectations, knowing what to expect is one of the 5 points, and we knew that different tactics were going to be probably thrown at me. So we spoke, for example, and we agreed on what boundaries to set, on how to answer to certain hot topics that we knew Granny would bring up, and so on. And with all that done, that was valuable. That was very valuable, because we navigated 4 days out of 5, which was the length of the visit, pretty good, which was amazing. Like, that was the first off, to this degree of actually being grounded and keeping regulated and keeping fine with it. And it was like pretty awesome. She tried mothering criticism, which she does all the time, but she was ignored, which that would have triggered me in the past. Like, if I go back a few years ago, that would have drove me up the walls, and I didn't even know why. So that was a big difference for me. Now, she tried money control. That didn't work. She tried her usual guilt tripping, which for me was one of the especially triggering in the past. Like, guilt tripping, it's been the way she's kept me under control for the best part of my life. So she used to do it all the time when I was a child, to make sure I kept being around her, I kept minding her emotionally. I was always around her. But this time it didn't work. And she tried going hard on my daughters, but boundaries were immediately set, so she had to drop that. So everything she tried met a wall of non-reaction and boundaries, and I could see her frustration rising. It was interesting to watch. The intensity of the experience was on her, which is not something she's used to, especially not with me. She may be used to it, maybe with other people, I don't know, but with me, not, because I've always taken the intensity on myself for her. That was my minder job with her. I never wanted her to suffer. I never wanted her to be uncomfortable. I was the one doing whatever it took to keep her happy and at ease. Ever since I was a small child, like, I'm talking about 3, 4, 5 years of age, that's what I was doing. Obviously not being aware of all of that. She never had to get vulnerable when I was around, and I was around all the time. She made sure that I was around all the time, so much as that when I grew up and I started my own family, I actually neglected my life, my husband and my daughters, because I had to make sure Granny was okay, and I had to always mind her. Which, once I got aware of this a few years ago, a lot of things changed. So now things are definitely different, and she could feel that until, and that's where it gets interesting, until she got me. And how did she get me? Because I'm not invincible. As you know, I do say it all the time, I'm here doing this work just as much as you are. She got me on a blind spot. And I want to talk about this. What are blind spots? Maybe it's the first time you hear about this. Maybe you've heard about blind spots before. But it is something that is very important to be aware of. Blind spots are what you don't know that you don't know about yourself. So there's what you know you don't know. That's okay. But there's also what you don't know about yourself. The blind spots are bits of subconscious you're not yet aware of. You properly have no idea they're there. You don't even know you gotta go dig for them. You have no idea. And yet, they're controlling you from the subconscious. And a narcissist hunts for the blind spots that can get you vulnerable, like a hawk looking for a field mouse. Okay? It's a relentless hunt. She will just go dig them up, because that's what she needs in order to get you back in under her control. And how did that look like for me in this visit? Well, first she managed to get me alone on the last day, which we had planned, my husband and I had planned I wouldn't be alone with her, but it happened so quickly, I was too late by the time I realized what was going on. And she went on the attack with the usual topics she uses with me. And I had boundaries ready for those. I was ready, so all good. Or so I thought. because she managed to uncover a blind spot, something I hadn't prepared for because I didn't know it was there. A topic that I clearly still had quite the emotional load around and got me vulnerable. I felt the tears rising. And the interesting part for me this time is that I saw it as if it was happening in slow motion. And I do get this with clients as well. When we get to a certain point of actually having awareness of what's going on, and we're not actually retreating in old patterns anymore, it's like we're observing the scene happening as if we were watching a movie. And it's like, whoa, is this, she's saying that, and this is how I'm reacting. Wow, that's interesting. And a lot of awareness can come from that. I'm going to get in a little bit, I'm going to let you know what you can do if you're going through one of these experiences. But for now, I'm just going to tell you what happened. So I saw it as if it was happening in slow motion. The moment she got me emotionally reactive, so the moment I took the bait and I felt like a 5-year-old being chastised, actually, because in that same moment she lit up. She got all energized, like her entire face changed, her expression changed, her posture changed. She went from the 4 days previous where she was all frustrated and getting more and more irritated and more beat up in herself and like without energy, and she was feeling the intensity of being in a place where she had to get vulnerable if she wanted to get to me. Now she was back in control. Now she was energized. Now she had the game again in her own, the game was in her own control again. She was back in charge, in a place where she could hide her vulnerability and be comfortable again. And the intensity at that point was on me. So it wasn't on her anymore, like I kept it for the 4 days. It was on me. The conversation lasted about 15 minutes in total. And yet, I came out feeling like a lorry had driven over me and reversed for good measure. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because setting boundaries with your narcissistic mother, and never mind the fact that, as I said, it is my grandmother I'm talking about here, but it is as if like she has been like a mother to me for, like she took me into her home when I was a few months old. And like when my mother wouldn't feed me, that's when my grandmother would feed me and would put me to bed and would, prepare me to go to school and take care of me, bring me on holidays and do all of that. My grandmother has been the person that has raised me in my early childhood up until I was about 12. So she's had the same influence of a mother for me. So when you're setting boundaries with your narcissistic parent or person that has raised you, this person is bound to bring on an intensifying of her toxic behavior, at least for a while, until she finds a different source to feed on. And until that point, she will try every way to get you back in the loop, because you are her source to feed on and to get her needs met. If you are moved away, if you put boundaries, if you stop, if you cut that supply to the narcissist is going to try and do anything in their power to get you back. They need to find another supply. But if they don't, that's where they're going. They're coming back for you. And for as much as you can prepare, which is a very good practice, I do say it in the boundaries episode, is prepare, state, maintain. So that preparation phase is essential. If I hadn't had that, I wouldn't have had 4 days of actually being great. And also those 15 minutes of conversation would have been a 3 hours conversation, and it would have been a lot worse. So preparing is key. But for as much as you can prepare, you'll have blind spots. We all do. In the one-on-one program, part of my job is to support my clients uncovering these blind spots so that they can be more prepared and more aware. And usually this is the work I do with my husband. My husband is the one that supports me with that. He does a lot. He's a coach. He works with that. He does the same job as I do with men, so he can support me in finding the blind spots. And usually we're pretty on the point. But one this time got past the scan unseen, and this can happen too. This is also important to note. Sometimes the only way to become aware of a blind spot is in hindsight, which is a pain in the neck. I get it, But if you can use the experience to learn from it, then you can be more prepared the next time. So there is a value in that. This is like, she's never gonna get me on that same blind spot again. It's not a blind spot anymore. It took me 15 minutes of conversation. It was intense, it was hard, but I had to go through it. Now I know that that's a tactic she's gonna use. Now I know that she's gonna try again to get through to me using that path, and that path is gonna be closed. She's not gonna get in again. So that's the learning from the experience. So I'm going to share with you the 2 questions that I ask myself after experiences like this, and they are the same 2 questions I use when working with clients. And these questions are: what went well, and what can I do different next time? Very simple and yet super powerful questions to ask yourself after a tough experience. And this can actually be applied in anything in life, not just experiences with a narcissistic mother, but I found it especially helpful when going through such an experience. So I'm going to go through how I answered these questions in this particular case for myself, just to give you an example. So what went well for me in this case? First of all, there was an awareness of what was happening. In those 15 minutes of conversation, even when Granny got me on the blind spot, I was aware of what was happening. Do you remember I mentioned I could see it as if it was happening in slow motion, and I was in there. I actually knew what was happening. That means I didn't dissociate, which is what I used to do years ago, and for the best part of my life when things like that happened. And I would actually, my past would be that I would come out of a conversation like this with no memory of what had even happened. Like my husband, for example, could ask me, what was said? What happened? What did she say that got you so upset? And I'd be like, I don't know. I actually don't know. I have no idea what happened, but here I am feeling like this. Or I wouldn't even know how I was feeling. After, it would take me days. He could be asking me, you seem off, what happened? And I'm like, no, I'm perfectly fine. And then days after, a bomb would explode and everything would come out, and it wouldn't be pretty at all. So that none of that happened. This time I was fully there. And in my past, said conversation would have lasted 2-3 hours at least. But by remaining present, I managed to keep setting boundaries throughout and keep it to 15 minutes. At which point I was like, that's enough. I'm not continuing on this conversation with you. This allowed me not to get dragged into a messy game Granny wanted me to get into too much. She did get me for a little bit, but it was only for a little bit. So that's what went well for me in this case. And that's important, because when you focus for a moment on what went well, you can actually just give yourself that acknowledgement that you never really received when you were younger. I've never had my mother sitting me down after an experience going, okay, my darling, what went well? She just went straight for what didn't go well and made it massive and shamed me and all of that, get angry and whatever, punish me and all of that. So we never had that. And that is so important, because what went well is what just allows your heart to go, okay, well, yeah, actually, that was great. And even if it's a small thing, even if it's what seems to be a very, very, very small thing that went well and everything else didn't, okay? So even if it's very small, that small thing is worth acknowledging, because the more we acknowledge that, the more that small thing that went well grows, and the next time it's going to be more and more and more and more, okay? So this question is essential. Then, what can I do different next time? This is where we improve. This is where we grow. And that's also very important. So both parts, acknowledging what went well and then feeling into what you can do better, because there's always room for improvement. That doesn't mean you're bad or wrong or you've done things bad, but there's always room for improvement. So what can I do different next time? I know in my case, I will be way more careful not to be alone with my grandmother. I now know for sure that no alone time is safe with her. If I get caught alone again, I'll state, I won't discuss this alone with you. If you keep talking, I'll leave. and that'll be my boundary. So that's what I can do different next time. So these two questions can turn what can seem like a mistake on your part for getting caught in the game again into a very valuable experience. Remember, there's no mistakes, just experiences, and how you approach that, you can change something that can seem like a mistake into a valuable experience. Your narcissistic mother knows you, and she knows how to find your blind spots like no one else. It's incredible. She has spent your entire life training you and also getting to know how to get to you. So it is inevitable that she will manage to get through at times. Even if you are the best at setting boundaries, even if you are so prepared, no one else is as prepared as you are, there are times that she will find your blind spots and she'll get to you. So rather than beating yourself up when it happens, use those experiences to reinforce what you're doing better than before, which is really important, and to learn what you can improve for the next time. To redefine your boundaries, for example, like in my case, I now have a new boundary that I know I'm going to use, or to work on the emotional load around the blind spot that got uncovered. Again, that was my case. So now I also know, on top of having figured out that boundary, I also know that there's this whatever topic that she brought up that I need to do some work around, and I have already. In the days that have passed, I have already worked on that quite intensely. So all of this is in what you can improve for the next time. So 2 questions, just to recap: what went well and what can I do better next time? This is really key when you're going through an experience where you feel like your mother has come more intensely on the attack because you're setting boundaries. And when we set boundaries, they try different tactics. They try to get to you from different points. They're going to keep trying because they need their supply. And it's bound to happen that at some point they'll get through to you. So what went well? What can I do better next time? Now, there's one last bit I want to share with you that it is important. And that is the aftermath of such an experience. So no matter how much I did better than usual this time around, I didn't dissociate. I kept my boundaries. I reflected on what I can do better next time. I got 4 days out of 5 when things were going really good. Awesome. Still, there's no rationalizing myself out of the triggering of deep wounds in the aftermath. Ignoring this part can get you spiraling down old patterns and not fully knowing it is even happening until you have a fight with your partner, for example, or you snap at your kids, or you feel depressed for days and don't know why, and so on. Okay? Even if you're doing everything really amazingly, deep wounds may very well be triggered when you have such an encounter with your narcissistic mother or a triggering person. This can actually happen with other people too, but for the for the purpose of this podcast, we're focusing on their narcissistic mother. So and very often I've done that tons of time. I thought I did great, which I did. I did great, but because I did great, I was like, I'm fine. There's nothing being triggered here, nothing to see here. I'm totally fine. I'm 100% fine. And I kept repeating that, rationalizing my way out of deep wounds being super triggered. And that then translated into those wounds and those old patterns sneakily coming back up in other areas of my life. Like, as I said, a fight with my husband. Oh, that happened so many times. And then he got really good at this. He was like, oh, you got a phone call with your dad last week. That's why now we're fighting like cats and dogs. And that would pause me, and I'd be like, oh, yeah, actually, that's true. I had completely ignored the aftermath of such a phone call, thinking I've done brilliant. I've applied all these techniques and tools, so I should be fine, right? No, these deep wounds get triggered no matter how good you're doing, because they're there, and each time they get triggered you get a release. And when you work with that, then you get to the point that truly they don't get triggered quite as much anymore. And and it gets better. But it's important to acknowledge that aftermath. So the next day, for example, after this experience, we had this experience on day 5, then my granny was back on a plane and back to Italy and goodbye. But I was left and I was nappy and I was upset about everything around me. Everything around me felt like chores, and I felt alone, and I was annoyed, and I was really irritable, and all of that. And I've come to learn about myself, because this is a very important part of this work. You start learning what the triggers are, and you start learning how your patterns, what are your patterns in reaction to these triggers. So I know what my red flags are when I'm being triggered. I've come to know those. I wasn't always aware of this. I actually, a lot of the times I thought I was 100% right in being feeling that way, or I thought that was just my personality, or I blamed the outside world for it. And so I've done all of that. But I now know that these are my red flags. They are signs I'm going down into hopelessness, which happens when the wound of not being enough gets triggered in me. So if I feel like I'm not enough and that wound gets stoked, then I go into hopelessness, and then all of those outer signs come up. And I've learned that. And you can learn to know yourself that way too. So when you learn that, then you can catch it. So I realized then that when Granny got me in the conversation and she got that blind spot that I mentioned, her subconscious aim was to make me feel incapable of handling things myself, so she could again feel needed. Okay, for her, and I know this about her, not being needed equals being discarded. That's her thing. She needs to be needed. And that's because it is one of her undealt core wounds, because obviously being a narcissist, she hasn't dealt with anything. So there's no telling her that it's not true, that, I love her even if I don't need her. I just love her. That's it. But that doesn't get through. It doesn't. She won't listen to that. Believe me, I've tried, and I've stopped because I know she won't listen. But so to get herself back in control, she had to get me feel incapable. And she got me there. When I feel incapable, which has been one of my core wounds, feeling not enough to the level of being incapable, like I'm a child not being able to deal with adult things. That's how she wants me to feel and keeps me there. It's like a level of infantilization, if you want. So hopelessness is what creeps in for me. And before doing this work, something like this would have dragged me down for months. Okay, months, like literally. My husband even said that much. He was like, oh, I know that this would have been like at least a 6 months downward spiral years ago. This time I had tools. I've had tools. I've done a lot of work on this, so I felt it. I sought support to make sure no more blind spots were left unturned on this topic. I use what I know works for me to turn it around and move from hopelessness to a state of appreciation of all that I have created. And that, I know, for me is the medicine. I'm not saying that that's the medicine for everyone, but I know that when I'm in hopelessness, appreciation is what is the medicine for me. And I've learned that about myself. So, and this is not just a positive thinking process of overriding and suppressing uncomfortable feelings, so there's hopelessness, I'm going to pretend it's not there, and I'm just going to go around positive state in appreciation of everything. I've tried that, and that really did not work for me. Maybe it works for you, and if it does, brilliant. But positive affirmations when you're in a state that is not positive, that really is something that my body just had so much resistance for, still has, and I'm trusting my body. So that doesn't work for me. What I'm talking about in moving from hopelessness to appreciation is a retraining of the nervous system. It's something that we do in time and practice and the right guidance, and you can do that too. Again, practicing and with the right guidance. And with this training, you can learn to get over strong triggers in less and less time. Because as I said, something like that would have taken me months. Now it was just a thing of, I think overall it was about an hour. That's it. Like, That's it. Then I was fine, really fine. Not fake fine, pretending to be fine, positive thinking myself into being fine, rationalizing fine. No, actually fine, and really embodied fine. Really fine. More than fine, actually. So you get to know what works for you, and what's your medicine, and how to infuse it in your body and mind. And that's key. That is actually the whole process of reclaiming your fullness, of reclaiming your life. That's what it is. It's not like that you're never going to get triggered again. It's not that your narcissistic mother is never going to get to you again. But it's how you can, in a very embodied, deep way, turn it around for real. To the point that she's affecting you less and less, because you can just turn it around this quick. It's like a click of the fingers, and from a situation that would have dragged you down, now you're actually just able to turn it around and go, yeah, I'm fine. That's whatever your issue. That's actually the thing is, that's nearly ironic in a way, but Granny wanted me to feel incapable so that she would be back in control. Her little 15 minutes conversation getting me on the blind spot that she felt so awesome about, which she's still sending me messages about, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. But actually it got me to a space. I've turned it around. I use it as fuel to appreciate what I have even more. So I'm actually even more excited about what I'm doing. I feel even more capable than I was before she came up to visit. So that kind of backfired for her a little bit. But that's what happens. You can actually turn what gets triggered instead into something that drags you down and makes you feel disempowered, makes you feel hopelessness, makes you feel sad, makes you feel like you're useless and all of that. You can turn it into fuel that actually energizes you even more, makes you feel better about yourself. And I know that this can sound like impossible. I know if someone told me this years ago, I would have been like, yeah, right. I love that you're saying that, but I don't believe that's applicable to me. You don't know my situation. And I get that. I do get that, because when we are in the thick of the situation, and we are into those patterns of hopelessness, of self-blame, shame, not being empowered, and all of that, which is very normal to be there after having been brought up by a narcissistic mother, we don't actually see a way out. And I get that. And to be told that you can actually turn it around to such a degree can seem like, yeah, that's dreamland. That's impossible. It's unachievable, and all of that. I get it. I really do. But I am never going to stop telling you that it is 100% possible. That's my job. That's why I'm here. That's why I started this podcast 100,000 listens ago. That's why I started, to tell you that you can actually break free from all of that crap, actually be free from all of those patterns, be pretty much immune to triggers in a way. And I know, as I said, you're always going to get triggered. Blind spots are there, but you're going to be able to turn it around in such a way that is sort of like being immune to triggers. And that is possible. That's 100% possible for everyone. For everyone. I'm not special. I am in so many ways, just like you are in so many ways. We're all special, but it's not that I'm special because I can do it and you can't. We all can do this. We all can do this. Just like I have done it, and I keep doing it, because it's not a job that you get to a point that you have it done and then that's it. You don't have to do it anymore. You're going to have to keep practicing. You're going to have to keep improving, expanding, growing into yourself more and more beautifully into yourself. That's what we do every day. That's what I do every day. But you can do this. You can. With the right guidance, the right support. If it's with me in the one-on-one, if it's with me in the new community that's coming in February, that's great. If it's with someone else, with some other guy that you resonate with, that's great too. Get the support, because you can actually get to this place where your life is fully yours, where you've reclaimed your life, where you are you, and you can turn around an attack from your narcissistic mother in a way that you never would have thought possible. Which does not mean go look for her to attack you and mess with you, of course. This is not invalid. I'm still no contact from my mother and I'm keeping it that way, so that's also true at the same time. And the important starting point of what I said about the aftermath is to be aware of the fact that an attack from your narcissistic mother, even when you dealt with it really great, will have an aftermath of triggered emotions. That's important. That's where you can start right now. It's like to keep that awareness, accept that that's going to happen. This is not a time to make decisions. It's not a time to pay too much attention to your thoughts, because the thoughts go down dark really, really quickly when we're in the aftermath of a triggered, very deep wound. So those thoughts are not to be listened to. It is a time to be kind with yourself and do what is needed for you to self-regulate and gently bring yourself back to a good place, whatever your medicine is. The more you practice, the quicker it gets. And there's tools. Again, there's breath, there's movement, there's seeking support and guidance, there's sharing with other people that are in the same situation. That's part of it, and it really helps. So there's different things that you can do to get yourself back in a good place. So to recap, when you set boundaries, things can get more intense. Your narcissistic mother won't give up her supply so easily. If she gets you back in the loop, don't beat yourself up. Instead, you can ask yourself, what went well? And what can I do different next time? And then be kind with yourself in the aftermath and use the tools you have to get yourself back in a good place. Seek support and guidance to know how to retrain your system to get back okay quicker and quicker. So that's it for today. I really hope this was helpful, and please let me know if you have questions. You can email me at matilde@womenreclaimingtheirfullness.me if you have specific questions, or also you're super welcome to share your experience in the comments below. So yeah, with that said, I am sending you lots of love and I wish you have a wonderful week. Bye for now.